Hello and welcome to our critical thinking course. Today we are covering chapters 4 through 6. Chapter 4 goes into the structure of claims. Claims are simply statements like I am speaking or today's Sunday. A claim asserts that something is either true or false. For example, the claim 2 plus 2 is 4 is a positive claim. It is a claim that something is true. Or 2 plus 2 is not 5 is a negative claim, a claim that something is false. This may seem rather obvious, but we can make it do quite a lot of work for us. The first thing we noted in the chapter is that any claim needs a justification, which is a reason to believe it. The job of the justification is twofold: to hold up the claim the way that the rest of the pyramid holds up the capstone at the top, and to give us a path from the ground level up to the top, which would be a way of reaching that claim. All those steps supporting the top of the pyramid are what lets us climb to the top. Similarly, the justification to a claim is a series of ideas that is supposed to be connected so that when we follow those connections, we get the claim as the conclusion. Now, if those steps are broken or missing, then we don't have a way of getting to the top. Justification is about the steps. But our other term, validity, is about whether our support structure is actually lined up with the top. All the support does nothing if the conclusion, that capstone of the pyramid, is supposed to be 20 feet to the left of where we end up. So with validity, we are checking whether the claim lines up. Often enough, people try to pull a fast one by presenting ideas as being connected when there is no actual connection. Kind of like those tourists that take pictures where it looks like they're holding up the Leaning Tower of Pisa or they have the Eiffel Tower in their hand. And you can have a perfectly good justification, but if it's not lined up properly with the claim, it is not valid. And that's because it does nothing to support the actual claim. As a last example here, you can imagine a perfect football pass. Long range, tight spiral, all the rest of that. However, the quality of the pass is made completely irrelevant if the quarterback chucks it into the stands. This is what a justification without validity is like. It looks great, but is ultimately pointless. To tie this back to chapters 1 through 3, when we face emotional interference, and especially moral interference, we don't really bother looking at the justification because we either agree or disagree with the claim on a visceral level. And this leads people to disagree with good ideas and agree with bad ones because they're emotionally reacting to the idea instead of thinking through it. Now, if emotional and moral interference messes with our ability to see the justification, various problems that are covered in Chapter 5 show us different ways in which bad arguments and bad assumptions mess with our ability to see the validity of an argument. Now for Chapter 5, I primarily want to focus on statistics because the rest of the problems should be pretty clear on their own. Statistics are very dangerous because you can get them to show just about anything you want without actually lying. And that makes them a great way to interfere with the validity of the justification for a claim, and in a way that most of us don't even really notice. So let's look at an example here. Let's imagine that we have a department of physics at a university, and let's say that the department has 200 students. Now, if 170 of those students are male and 30 are female, we might conclude that, statistically speaking, the department accepts more male than female students, and that's because 85% of the students are male and 15% are female. But if we go and look at the number of applicants, we might find that, let's say, 1,700 males applied and 40 females applied. Now at this point, we could conclude, based on those statistics, that the department accepts much more female students than male students, because it only accepted 10% of male applicants, but it accepted 75% of female applicants. But if we look at those same acceptance rates in terms of odds of getting in overall, we can conclude that the department is now more likely to accept men than women because they accepted 170 men out of 1,740 applicants in all, which is 9.7%, and only 30 women out of those same 1,470 applicants, which is roughly 1.7%. Or let's say that there is a $1,000 funding budget for students in the department, and it's split up so that men get 70% while women get 30%. And here we could say that men obviously get more funding than women, since they got 70% while women only got 30%. Or if we consider that female students make up 15% of the department are getting 30% of total funding, which is more than their equal share, while 85% of the department, which is the male students, are only getting 70%, and at that point it appears very obvious that women get more funding than men. That difference, by the way, would mean something like each female student gets $10 in funding and each male student gets $4.11 out of that same funding, so women would be getting an extra 243% more funding than men. Now notice here that the facts haven't changed, but the meaning of those facts keeps on shifting depending on what we happen to think is a relevant set of features to measure, and where do we draw the line. Do we draw the line at how many students are in the department? Do we draw the line at how many applicants got accepted? Do we draw the line at how many were accepted against the total number of applicants versus the number of applicants of that gender? So the danger here is that statistics can be twisted in unimaginable ways, and so they're often used to mislead the audience, whether intentionally or not, by making the claim and the justification seem connected even when they're not. Now, as a final point, the book concludes chapter 5 by saying, quote, "Trust no one." To clarify, this means that you can't and should not trust anyone blindly. That is, you can't just turn off your brain and accept whatever you're told. You must always, always think for yourself. You don't have to be an expert to tell when something sounds wrong, and then you can ask questions and do some research. If a plumber tells you that the toilet replacement will cost $5,000, or a car mechanic tells you that you need to change your blinker fluid, you don't need to be a plumber or a car mechanic to figure out that something is wrong. Now, yes, this also means, as some of you tend to ask, that you should not blindly trust your professors or textbooks, including this textbook and me. Don't simply accept these ideas. Think about them and check to see if they make sense and if they work. And if they do, great, but if they don't accept them. In chapter 6, we looked at several ideas that we will need to keep in mind when looking at claims or making our own. First, facts are always in need of interpretation, because the facts can't tell you what they mean. Second, whenever we interpret facts, we have to introduce a bias into the system, and this is because we have to decide which facts do and don't matter and how they should be related. Third, the same facts can be interpreted in an infinite number of ways, and this is because the interpretation will depend on what you think is relevant, how relevant is it, what the relations between the facts are, and so on. Now you may notice that this has the same set of problems as when we were dealing with statistics. The only way to make sense of claims and interpretation is to look for their functionality. And you can do that by looking for coherent, explanatory, and actionable ideas within the claim, or alternately, you can look for internal coherence of a claim, that would be whether the ideas of a claim line up and give you validity, and external coherence of a claim, whether the ideas of the claim line up when compared to known reality. Now, it doesn't really matter which path you choose because they both lead to the same conclusion and you will more or less ask all the same questions. Now, these first 6 chapters and the introduction are a way to establish a foundation for critical thinking. First, we must be careful to ensure that we're using reason instead of acting on emotion, or else there won't be any thinking happening. Second, we have to understand what claims are, how they're supposed to be justified, and that the justification has to actually hold up the claim through validity. If there is no justification, or if the justification is not valid, we have no reason to accept the claim. And finally, because people are free to interpret reality and all the facts in it however they wish, we can't assume that their interpretation will match our own. So we can't assume that their ideas are automatically functional for us. Now, with these foundations out of the way, we are ready to jump into the core part of critical thinking, which we will discuss in chapters 7 through 10. If you have comments, questions, concerns, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Subscribe, like, share, and all the rest of that good stuff.